Hey everyone, it's Alex here, and I have a ton of videos for you about photography, videography, graphic design, creativity, all these awesome cool things. But before I dive into any of those, I want to start super simple and answer the question, how does a camera even work? Cameras are everywhere these days, and that means everybody has the ability to take any photos, any videos that they want at any time. And that's awesome. It turns everybody into an amateur photographer. But understanding the process and the science behind how the camera works can actually really help you create awesome content. So when thinking of professional cameras, like something you'd see somebody using at a wedding to take photos or a professional sporting event, they're these kind of big chunky cameras and they have these long lenses. They're called Dslr cameras, and that stands for Digital Single Lens Reflex Camera. Basically all it is it takes the light in and it hits a mirror and it reflects the mirror up into the eyepiece where you look through, and that's how you see the image. So there's actually a mirror in there that moves and reflects the light so that you can see it through the camera. And then there are mirrorless cameras. They're much smaller and they are literally the same kind of technology. They just don't have the mirror inside of them, so they can compact it smaller. In fact, the camera on your phone or your tablet is actually mirrorless, and that's how it can be so tiny and still take a good enough photo because it doesn't need a physical mirror or any large pieces in there to make it work. All right, so you want to take a picture, and what happened? How did your picture appear magically all of a sudden? To understand this, we gotta dive into a little bit of science. So light particles are everywhere. They're bouncing around everywhere. I have lights here that are bouncing light at me, and there's lights behind me. That's how we see. If you don't have light particles, things appear dark. Just like when the sun goes down and it gets nighttime, we lose our light, darkness creeps in, and we can't see anymore. Light particles are bouncing everywhere, and they enter into our eye, and that's how we see. And a camera works the exact same way. A lens is like an eye on a camera. So imagine we're a little light particle that just bounced off of a mountain or something that we're flying towards the camera now. That light particle goes through the lens of the camera and it stamps onto the sensor, which is kind of like the brain or how the camera perceives the picture that you want to take. And when you multiply that light particle times however many other billion light particles are coming into the lens, then you get a stamped image, similar to like a mosaic. And that's really it. A camera just operates by taking light particles that get stamped onto the sensor, and that's how it takes a picture. It gathers all that information and turns it into a digital image. But understanding how quickly it does that and how you can constrict that light flow and how much you're letting in is how you can change the effects of the photo or the video that you're taking. So let's take a step back for a moment and go through the timeline that a light particle has to go through when entering the camera. The first thing that encounters is the lens, and this is like the eye of the camera. You can get lenses that zoom super far to constrict and see further. You can get lenses that zoom wide out and see all kinds of things around you. Basically, a lens just lets your camera see what the image is that you want to take. And we got to make sure it's clean. If it's a dirty camera, we'll see all kinds of smudges in our image and it just won't look very good. Next is the aperture, and you can actually see this if you look into the lens. It's built into each and every lens. It's a small opening that contracts and gets bigger and smaller, just like the pupils on our eyes. When we step into a dark room from a light room, it takes us a second to adjust. Our pupils are getting bigger and smaller to let in more or less light to let our eyes adjust. And a camera works the exact same way. So it's like a little window that lets in more light or less light depending on how much you want in your image. And then from there, we jump into the camera itself. We're out of the lens and into the camera, and we have to go through the shutter. And it's like a door that opens and closes super fast. And most times it's going to open and close so fast that it captures and freezes all that light all at once, and that's how you get a crisp, clean image. So let's say you're taking a photo of a cheetah running super fast and you want to get it without any blur. You don't want its legs to be blurry. You don't want your photo to be all weird and you can't see what it is. You want to just capture it. If you have your shutter set to where it closes super fast, then it will capture all that light without any motion blur. And similarly, on the flip side, if you want some blur, then you let it close a little bit slower. So instead of having it open and close for a fraction of a second, because it's closed, when you go to take a picture, you press the button and that's that noise that you hear, that it's opening and closing this door to let in all this light. If you want a blurry photo where you want a little bit of blur, maybe you let it stay open a second longer. So it'll go and let in just a little bit more light. And that's how you can get motion blur. So think of it this way. If you're gonna stamp something onto paper and you stamp it and you don't lift up your hand and you move, it just smears it around. But if you stamp it and let up really quick, it stays clean and crisp and clear and there's no blur, and it works the same way. Your light is just stamping onto the sensor, And if it stays open and there's more light coming in, if your object moves or if you move, then you're going to get a smeared, blurry image just like that stamp on the paper. But if it stamps and then no more light comes in, then you get a nice, clean, crisp image. But there's another cool trick to this little door called the shutter. It really helps you take photos at night. So you've probably tried this. You've probably taken a photo in the dark and realized it doesn't turn out super good, or it turns out super grainy and it just looks really bad. That's because our camera's trying to compensate with something called ISO. And it basically adds extra digital light, tries to lighten up your image artificially within the camera. Won't get into all that today, but basically it adds blur and it doesn't look super good. We want as much natural light as possible in our photo. So what you can do at night with this shutter, if you take a tripod and set up your camera and you're gonna take a picture of something, turn your ISO off or super low, and set your shutter to stay open for a really long time. Speaking of light, I just lost a light here, so I had to open the window. But anyway, let's get back to it. If it's super dark and you want to take a picture, you press the button, your shutter stays open, and it can stay open for as long as 30 seconds, a minute. It's just letting all this light in, all this light hit the sensor. The more light that comes in, even if it's just a little bit, the clearer and the better image you'll see. This is why photos of stars at night or in space are really cool and how they can turn out super clear if you use your camera properly. So it stays open, it's letting in all that light, and then it shuts, and then you're left with a really clear, crisp image. That's also why you want to use a tripod for this, because if you try to do this handheld and you're shaking and moving, as it's capturing even just the slightest bit of movement will make it blurry. So if you use a tripod, you want to make sure you're not moving when you do this. But we'll have more videos about this in the future where we'll go into depth about some of this stuff, so don't worry. So that's it, that's how a camera works. Light particles come through the lens, through the aperture, through the shutter, and get stamped onto the sensor, and then it takes that information, all that light, and transfers it onto your SD card or into your photo gallery on your phone, and that's how a camera takes photos. Video is a whole nother topic, we'll cover that in a different video, so make sure you stay tuned for that one coming up. But definitely let me know if you have any questions or comments. I'd love to hear your feedback and help you out if any of this was confusing to you. I want you to succeed, I want you to go out there and create something awesome. So in the meantime, thanks for watching and go make something cool.